The parking lot outside the Meridian Hotel was full of cars that cost more than most people's annual salary. I sat in my 12-year-old Ford F-150, the one with the cracked dashboard and the passenger window that sticks halfway, watching valets in black vests jog back and forth between a line of BMWs and Audis. I checked my watch. 6:47. The reception started at 7. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the envelope. Thick, cream-colored, sealed with a small gold clasp. I'd carried it for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment to hand it over. Inside was a signed letter of intent, my commitment to transfer full ownership of the Callaway industrial property on Route 9. 42 acres of commercial land I'd spent 30 years paying off, appraised last spring at $4.1 million. My son had asked for it as collateral to finalize his business partnership deal. I'd said yes. I always said yes. I tucked the envelope back into my breast pocket, adjusted the collar of my dress shirt, the blue one, not the gray, and stepped out of the truck. A valet glanced at my vehicle and then looked away without offering to park it. I walked to the entrance alone. The ballroom inside the Meridian was everything my son had described when he called me 2 months ago. His voice tight with barely contained excitement. "Dad, this is it. This is the one that changes everything." Crystal chandeliers, round tables with white linen, a small stage at the far end with a podium and a banner that read Callaway and Marsh Development Group Launch Night. My name was in that company name. My land was the foundation of everything in this room. I looked at the banner for a long moment, then found a seat near the back. I didn't know many people there. Most were business contacts of my son's men in their late 30s and 40s, dressed in suits that fit the way suits are supposed to fit. A few of their wives stood in clusters near the bar, laughing at something I couldn't hear. I recognized my son's college friend, Marcus, who nodded at me from across the room. And I saw my daughter, Claire, standing near the entrance with her husband, scanning the room with that quiet alertness she's had since she was 9 years old. She spotted me immediately and crossed the room. "Dad." She hugged me the way she always does, both arms, no hesitation. "You look nice." "Your mother bought me this shirt," I said. 8 years ago." She laughed and sat beside me. Her husband, a quiet man named Dennis who teaches high school history and genuinely seems to enjoy it, shook my hand and took the seat to her left. "Have you talked to your brother yet?" I asked. Something crossed her face. Not quite a frown. More like the expression people make when they're deciding how much to say. "Briefly. He's been running around all day. Stressed. That's understandable. Big night." "It is," she said carefully. I didn't push it. Claire had been warning me for months, in her indirect way, about the direction things were heading with her brother. Small comments. "He's under a lot of pressure, Dad. He listens to her more than anyone right now." The her she meant was my daughter-in-law. A woman I'll call by her role rather than her name, because that's all she ever was to me in the end. My daughter-in-law. And later, the architect of my humiliation. My son found me about 20 minutes later, just as the servers were beginning to circulate with appetizers. He looked the way he always looks when something important is happening, jaw tight, eyes moving too fast, a smile that doesn't quite reach the muscles around his eyes. He was wearing a suit I'd never seen before. It fit him very well. "Dad, you made it." He shook my hand. Not a hug. We used to hug. "Of course I made it." "Good. Good." He glanced toward the front of the room, then back at me. "Listen, I need to tell you something before the evening gets going." "All right." He lowered his voice. "We changed the seating arrangement. Last-minute thing. You're going to be over here near the back, rather than at the main table. My partner's family is flying in, and there were more of them than expected, so..." "That's fine," I said. I found a seat. He nodded, relieved in a way that told me the reason had nothing to do with his partner's family. "Great. And, when the formal remarks start, just hang tight. It's going to be a quick presentation, 20 minutes, and then dinner. I'll be right here." He left. Claire, who had heard all of it, said nothing. She just put her hand briefly on my forearm and then looked away. My daughter-in-law appeared about 10 minutes before the program started. She came from the direction of the main table, moving with the purposeful energy of someone who has planned every detail of an event and is conducting a final inspection. She was dressed in a dark red gown, and she wore it with the kind of confidence that usually takes decades to develop. I'll say that for her. She had presence. She stopped when she reached us. She looked at me the way you look at a piece of furniture that has been placed in the wrong room. "You're here," she said. "I am," I said. She glanced at Claire, then back at me. "I actually needed to speak with you about something." Her voice was low, controlled. "I wasn't sure you'd come tonight, honestly, given everything. I didn't know what everything meant." I let her continue. "The thing is," she said, "tonight is very important for the firm's image. We have institutional investors in that room, people from Hargrove Capital, 2 board members from Stanton Group. These are not," she paused, tilting her head, "slightly casual relationships. First impressions are everything in this business." I waited. "Your presence here, at the back like this, it's fine. But I need you to understand that you won't be acknowledged during the remarks. Your son and I discussed it, bringing up the family angle, the whole 'my father gave me land' story. It reads as small. These people are sophisticated. They don't respond to sentiment." I looked at her for a moment. Then I said, "I understand." She seemed slightly disappointed that I hadn't argued. "Good. Just enjoy the dinner. The salmon is excellent." She turned and walked back toward the main table. Claire said very quietly, "Dad." "I'm fine," I said. The program started at 7:30. My son took the podium looking polished and certain, and I watched him the way I've watched him his entire life, with a specific kind of love that doesn't require anything back. He spoke for 18 minutes about market vision and vertical integration and community-centered development. He was good. He's always been good at standing in a room and making people believe in him. I taught him that, though I suspect he doesn't think about it that way anymore. He did not mention me. Not once. When he said, "And none of this would be possible without the foundation we built together," he gestured to my daughter-in-law, who stood and acknowledged the applause with a small, elegant nod. The foundation. My 42 acres. My 30 years. I sat in the back of the Meridian Hotel ballroom, and I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger. Anger is hot and fast, and I've never been built for it. This was something slower, something that had been building for a very long time, finally reaching the temperature at which it becomes permanent. After the applause settled and people began moving toward the dinner tables, my daughter-in-law returned. She had someone with her this time, a tall man in his 50s I didn't recognize. Silver hair. The particular posture of someone accustomed to being the most important person in whatever room he occupies. "I need you to step out," she said to me. I looked up at her. "For the dinner portion. Richard and his team are going to be seated in this section, and we don't have enough chairs for—" "You're asking me to leave," I said. She met my eyes without blinking. "I'm asking you to give us the space we need for the people who are making this deal possible. You've had dinner. You can take your truck, and there's a good diner on Route 12. They're open late." The silver-haired man, Richard, had the decency to look somewhere else. I looked past my daughter-in-law to where Claire was standing. My daughter's face had gone very still, the way it does when she's deciding how to respond to something. Her husband, Dennis, had his hand on her arm. In the background, my son was shaking hands with someone near the podium, his back to us. I reached into my breast pocket. I took out the envelope. My daughter-in-law's eyes went to it immediately. She knew what it was. She'd seen it before my son had shown her. I was sure of that. $4.1 million in land, sitting in a cream-colored envelope with a gold clasp. I held it for a moment. Then I said, "You're right. I should go." I unsealed the clasp. I opened the envelope and removed the document inside. My daughter-in-law's expression shifted, something wary entering it, the first crack in her composure all evening. I tore the letter of intent in half, then in half again. The sound was very clean in the air between us. Richard, the silver-haired man, turned to look. A woman at a nearby table stopped mid-sentence. My daughter-in-law said, "What are you?" "I'm removing the foundation," I said quietly. "Have a wonderful evening." I set the pieces of the document on the table, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the exit. I heard my daughter-in-law say something sharp and low behind me, and then I heard Claire say, "Don't," and I didn't look back. The parking lot was quieter than it had been an hour earlier. The same valet who'd ignored my truck was now standing near the entrance, smoking a cigarette. He watched me walk to my F-150 without expression. I got in, sat for a moment with my hands on the wheel, and then I drove home. My house is on the same land my father built on. 4 acres. Nothing fancy. A 2-story frame house with a barn I converted into a workshop 20 years ago. I'd lived there alone since my wife Carol passed. 6 years ago, September. Carol would have known exactly what to say about tonight. She had a clarity I never quite matched. I went to the workshop and turned on the radio, and I didn't sleep until almost 2 in the morning. My son called at 9 the next day. I let it go to voicemail. He called again at 9:40. I listened to both messages before calling back. The first one was controlled. "Dad, we need to talk about last night. That was a serious move, and you need to understand what's at stake." The second one was less controlled. When I called back, he answered on the first ring. "Do you have any idea what you did?" he said. "I do. The Hargrove deal is contingent on the Route 9 property as underlying collateral. Without that letter of intent, without that land secured in the agreement, they can pull out entirely. Do you understand that? Do you understand what that means?" "I understand what collateral means," I said. "I've been using it since before you were born." "Dad, I've been funding this dream of yours for 11 years, I said. "The first business loan in 2014. The equipment purchase in 2017. The office lease when you moved downtown. The Route 9 property, which I never sold and never developed specifically because you asked me not to. I held it for you. Do you understand what holding 42 acres for 11 years costs in opportunity? In property tax alone." Silence on the other end. "I sat in the back of that room last night," I said. "I sat in the back of a room named partly after my own land and listened to my son give an 18-minute speech in which I was not mentioned once. Then my daughter-in-law asked me to leave so that the important people could sit down. And I thought about Carol. I thought about what she would say. I paused. She would say, 'Walter, stop giving your whole self to people who've stopped seeing you.' So I stopped. My son was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Lower. 'Hargrove is going to walk.' 'Maybe they will,' I said. 'Maybe that's information about the deal's structure that you needed before tonight.' 'I can't believe you did this.' 'I know,' I said. 'I'll talk to you when you're ready to talk, son.' 'Not before.' I hung up. Claire called that afternoon. Hers was a different conversation entirely. 'Dad, I need you to know that I've been trying to tell him for 2 years. Her voice was careful, but something underneath it had loosened, like a knot finally released. "About the way she talks to you. About how you've been treated. He's in a place where he can't hear it." "I know. What are you going to do about the land?" "Nothing immediately. It's mine. I'll decide what to do with it on my own timeline. He's going to come to you. When the deal falls through, he'll come. He might. What will you say?" I thought about it. "I don't know yet. I think I need some time to figure that out." Claire was quiet for a moment. "Are you okay, Dad?" "Yeah," I said. "Surprisingly, I am." Hargrove Capital withdrew from the partnership 3 weeks later. I found out not from my son but from Marcus, his college friend, who called me out of what I can only describe as a combination of loyalty and guilt. "I was there, Mr. Calloway. I saw what happened. I want you to know that a few of us, we saw it. The deal collapse had a cascading effect, the way these things do when a structure has been built on a single load-bearing assumption. The Marsh half of the partnership, a man named Derek Marsh, who I'd met twice and never quite trusted, exercised an exit clause and dissolved the entity. My son's firm was left holding 2 active contracts and no capitalization to fulfill them. By December, he'd laid off 4 of his 6 employees. My daughter-in-law called me in November. I was in the workshop when the phone rang, sanding a walnut tabletop I'd been working on for a neighbor. I almost didn't answer, but I did. She didn't say hello. She said, "How could you do this to your own family?" I kept sanding. The rhythm of it helped me think. "Hello," I said. "You destroyed everything he built. You know that. You took 11 years of work, and you burned it down because your feelings were hurt at a party." I set the sandpaper down. "I want to ask you something," I said, "and I'd like an honest answer, though I won't require it." She said nothing. "When you told me to leave that room, did you think about what you were doing? Or did it just seem like the efficient solution to a logistical problem?" "It was a logistical problem," she said. "That's all it was. That's what I thought." I picked the sandpaper back up. "My answer to your question is, I didn't do this to my family. Your husband is my family. You made a choice, a long time ago, to treat the people who didn't fit your vision of success as logistical problems. That choice had a cost. I just stopped absorbing it." She hung up. My son came to the house in the second week of December. He drove up the long gravel driveway on a Tuesday morning and sat in his car for several minutes before coming to the door. I watched him from the workshop window. He was thinner than I'd seen him in years. He looked like he'd been sleeping badly. I made coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table. The same table where he'd done homework every night from age 7 until he left for college. The same table where Carol and I had sat across from him and listened to his plans, his ideas, his certainty about the future. He wrapped both hands around the mug and looked at the table rather than at me. "I should have walked you down the aisle at that event," he said. The phrase came out odd, sideways, like he'd been rehearsing a different version of it for weeks, and this was what emerged. "I mean, I should have stood up there and said your name, told them what you did, what you gave." I drank my coffee. She told me it would look small, that the investors didn't respond to that kind of story. He shook his head slowly, and I believed her. Because I wanted to. Because it was easier to believe that than to admit that I'd been. He stopped. "Taking me for granted," I said. He looked up at me then. His eyes were red at the edges, in a way I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. "For a long time," I said. It wasn't an accusation. Just a fact that needed to exist in the air between us, before anything else could. "I know." We sat in silence for a while. Outside the kitchen window, the bare winter fields ran down to the tree line, the same view I'd had my whole life. My son stared at it. "Is there any way back?" he asked. "Not about the land. About something harder than land." "There's usually a way back," I said. "It's just not always the same road." He nodded. He didn't ask me about the Route 9 property that day. To his credit, he didn't ask about it for another 3 months. When he finally did, it was spring. We'd been having dinner together on Sunday evenings, just the two of us, nothing formal. I'd cook something simple, and we'd eat and talk about whatever came up. He asked about the land on a Sunday in March, and he asked it plainly, without any of the architectural framing he used to dress his requests in. "I know I don't have any standing to ask," he said. "I know what I did, or what I allowed to happen. But I want to rebuild. Differently this time. Smaller, no outside investors, no partners I don't fully trust. Just honest work." He paused. "I don't need the whole property. Even a portion 10 acres would give me enough to secure a project I've been designing. Something I actually believe in." I looked at my son across the table. He was 41 years old, and he looked in that moment more like himself than he had in years. Like someone who had been wearing a costume and had finally taken it off. "I've been thinking about what to do with that land since December," I said. "I made a decision about 6 weeks ago." He waited. 20 acres go to Claire. She's helped manage the back portion for years, and she's never once asked for anything. She deserves that security. I watched his face. He nodded immediately. No hesitation. And something in me released a tension I hadn't fully named. 10 acres. I'm keeping. I want to expand the workshop. Maybe build a proper studio out there. I've been putting that off for 15 years. He looked at his hands. "And the other 12? Those are yours," I said. "Not as a gift, not as a loan, as an investment, with a proper agreement, written by an actual attorney, with terms we both negotiate and both sign. I leaned forward slightly. I am not an ATM, and I am not a silent backer. If I'm in as your partner, and I expect to be treated like one. He looked up. His jaw was doing the thing it does when he's trying not to show what he's feeling. Deal, he said. And one more condition. Namit. Your daughter-in-law sits down with me. Not to apologize, I'm not interested in performances. But to have a real conversation. Once. About what happened and why. If she's going to be part of your life and, by extension, part of mine, I need to know we're operating in the same reality. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I'll ask her. She came in April. I don't think she wanted to. I think my son had asked her, carefully and seriously. And she'd agreed because she's not stupid. And she understood that the relationship, all of it, the marriage, the business, the family had a fracture running through it that needed to be addressed. She sat across from me at the same kitchen table, and for the first 20 minutes she was armored, every word placed deliberately. But somewhere around the third cup of coffee, something shifted. I asked her about her own father. It was a genuine question, not a tactical one. And she answered in a way that was longer and more unguarded than she'd intended. Her father had left when she was 11. Her mother had rebuilt everything from nothing. My daughter-in-law had learned, at close range, that weakness was dangerous, and that sentiment was how you ended up with nothing. I didn't say anything to that for a moment. Then I said, I understand that logic. I want you to understand that it costs you things you can't always see in the accounting. She looked at me. Like what? Like people who would carry weight for you that no investor ever will. I said. Like the difference between a foundation and collateral. She was quiet for a long time after that. When she left, she didn't hug me and I didn't expect her to. But she stopped at the door and looked back and said, I'll do better. I believed her enough to try. Marcus called me that evening. He'd heard, through the network of people who track these things, that my son was starting again, and that I was involved. Good, he said. He needs you, Mr. Calloway. He always did. He just forgot it for a while. He's not the first person to forget something important, I said. Most people get a chance to remember. I went to the workshop after the call. The walnut table I'd been making for the neighbor was finished, stained and waxed and waiting to be delivered. I ran my hand along the surface. 30 years of working wood had taught me that the grain is always honest. It shows you everything. The growth rings, the stress fractures, the years of drought, and the years of rain. You can't hide what a tree went through. You can only decide what to make of it. My wife Carol used to say that I made things because I needed to see the outcome of my work. That in a life where most of what you build, children, relationships, trust, is invisible, there's a particular satisfaction in creating something you can set your hands on and say, that is what I did. That is what I made. She was right. She was usually right. I turned off the workshop light and walked back across the yard to the house. The spring air was cool and clear, and the field beyond the fence line was beginning to show the first green of the season. That early tentative color, that means the worst is behind you. I stood there for a while. A year ago, I'd sat in a parking lot holding an envelope that represented 30 years of patience, waiting to hand it to a son who'd forgotten what I was worth. Tonight, the same land was being divided in a way that made sense. A portion for the daughter who'd never stopped seeing me. A portion for the work I'd always wanted to do, and a portion for the son who'd found his way back. Not because he needed the land, but because he'd finally understood that what I was offering was never about the land. Someone asked me once what I would tell a man in my position, patient for too long, taken for granted too many times, standing at the edge of a decision that couldn't be undone. I would tell him, dignity is not the same as pride. Pride makes you stay until it kills you. Dignity is what you take with you when you walk out of a ballroom at 7:53 on a Tuesday night, knowing that the thing in your breast pocket was worth more than everything in that room, and knowing, for the first time in years, that you're the only one who gets to decide when to open your hands and let it go. I went inside and made dinner. The house felt, not empty, but settled. the way old houses do when they've held enough story to stop creaking. I set the table for one, the way I have since Carol, and then I sat down. And for the first time in longer than I can clearly name, I felt something I only recognized because I'd been searching for it without knowing it. I felt free.